On behalf of the Rwanda Green Fund, it's my pleasure to welcome you at Kivu Noir in the first ever edition of the Catalyst Café. Thank you. Our role is to help unlock investment for green projects while supporting sustainable economic growth. With that definition, we need to unlock that so everyone, the normal person, can understand what we do. So before capital moves, conversations need to happen, which is why we created the Catalyst Café. This is not meant to be a conference. It's not a traditional panel discussion where each and everyone has different speeches. Instead, it's a space for honesty, thoughtful exchanges, and a room where ideas can be tested, challenged, and refined by the people shaping Rwanda's green economy. Today's theme reflects a question many of us encounter in this space. Why is doing the right thing still hard to finance? It's a question about risk, incentives, structure, and ultimately how the capital flows. And that is exactly what we hope to explore today with you. So thank you again for joining the first Catalyst Café conversation. And before we move to our first conversation, I would like to invite our Chief Strategy Officer, Yvan Rugwizangoga, to share a few opening remarks on behalf of our CEO.
Good morning. I think this is how we like to enjoy Fridays. Anything to be outside the office. So thank God it's Friday, and very happy for you to make the time and to be here with us today in what we're calling the Catalyst Knowledge Café. Isn't it exciting? Yes? Great. So today we say we don't want to make this very formal. So I will not even say, DOPS, who is somewhere in the back, or our colleagues all present. I think this is going to be a relaxed environment. It's going to be a place of discussion, of understanding, and of clarity to what we do as a sector. So as I mentioned, the Catalyst Café is going to be, of course, an honest conversation. We're going to unpack what is sometimes seen as complex ideas. We're going to explore how things actually work in practice, because we understand it and we think it is possible for people even outside the field to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of what we do and see how much is impactful. Because at the end of the day, the main goal for us is always looking for impact. So climate is real. Climate change is a priority for the government. I think that comes from the top down to the bottom. We are institutions, and I'm talking about the Rwanda Green Fund. I'm seeing REMA in the room, in ECOFIN. This is an all-government approach to make sure that something of such urgency is tackled with the right seriousness and the right intention. So, as Irebe already touched, we will talk about, of course, how everything's, of course, it's about money, but it's not always money that makes money move, right? It's not the way capital moves and what enables it to move is sometimes much more complicated. And we will, of course, dive into that and touch into the details of that. So about Rwanda, for some who are not maybe familiar with Rwanda, we've positioned ourselves as a leader in climate reforms, in climate, I would say, forward policies. One of the first countries in the region to ban the use of plastic, thanks to REMA, and its stewardship in that aspect. We really early on, through our policies and through our strategies, made sure that we are risk takers, we are leaders, we do not wait for things to change, we actually make it happen.
I will welcome our first moderator for our first conversation, Raissa Baudouin, who will moderate the first segment on demystifying climate finance. Raissa, welcome.
I know it's a bit hot, but as Yvan was saying, thank God it's Friday, thank God it's sunny and not raining. So for our first segment, as Irebe was explaining, this is going to be about demystifying climate finance, because there's a whole mystery around what is climate finance today, especially when we need to explain it to people not in the environmental or financial sector. Who was watching some news, and it was talking about green finance, and they were asking if we have green projects nowadays. So it's a simple question, right? But it reveals a lot about how people are not aware of green finance and projects and green projects. They usually refer to tree planting, greenwashing, and all these things. So, in your own words, right? Why do you think climate or green finance is sometimes feeling like an abstract and technical thing, and where does the disconnect come from, in your opinion?
Civil society will have something to add. I think the reasons to why even citizens think green finance means green money, so it's because you haven't worked with the civil society. So there is a need to try and deconstruct what green finance means, so that even someone at the hillside understands what green financing is all about. Because she or he, I'm using she because it's normally women who are in gardens. She might not know that she needs money to have to prevent soil erosion. And with all that, it's around green financing. When you look at some pamphlets or brochures of, is it green Gichumbi? Houses are painted green. So I started asking myself, does green financing mean having the houses painted green? When you look at Green Amayaga, they have these nice brochures.
And green.
Green. So, my dear sister who is in charge of communications, that sends a different meaning when it comes to green financing. So, it requires to be broken down. Within that green finance, what does it entail? There's renewable energies. Of course, my sister here from Rema, she knows there's still absence of renewable energy policy. So all that needs to be broken down so that people understand that green finance entails renewable energy, adaptation to climate, greenhouse gas emissions, and also because we've been used to grants, which at times people think that is free money, because some people think there is no accountability. So they also need to know that green financing is not free money. People might think that you will give them 100 or 500,000 euros to plant trees, and when Rema and Green Fund goes on the field, you just tick that we've seen trees. But then after planting, what do we want to see? Looking after those trees and ensuring that those trees grow and save the climate. Yeah. So in short, that's what I can say.
Even to go further, right? So you're mentioning tree planting as the example that we usually use around the country to explain green. However, of course, it's bigger than that. You also mentioned renewable energy. We can also talk about climate smart agriculture, etc. So fairly enough, I do think we need to translate the whole concept. So I think for that we can go maybe to Alex. You, as the coordinator of the National Fund for Environment that it started in 2012. Let's say if you meet someone outside of this space, outside of the environmental space, how would you describe climate finance in one sentence without making it technical? How have you been describing it as well since then?
Thank you for the question. It is timely. It's a little too late, because the wheel has been turning for quite some time, but it's also timely, as she said, that at least we are here talking about it. I will adhere to your question just in one sentence. Climate finance is money that is allocated to be used for addressing the causes and the effects of climate change.
Thank you very much. To add to that, so when you're mentioning climate finance is money allocated for projects related, to the sector. So it's far more than tree planting.
It sure is when I talked about allocated to the causes and the effects or impacts, as most people talk about. It is much broader than tree planting. It's about what actually is responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions. Again, a technical term. These are gases that go into the atmosphere. I don't think that's hard to understand. And then through a range of cycles, they cause things like heavy rains that are unpredictably intense, which then turns into the impact. And what that does is it's more than planting trees. It's renewable energy, as my colleague talked about. It's technology, it's economics, it's infrastructure. So it is much broader than just planting trees. Planting trees is an old adage that was affiliated with that. I really don't think, I will stand to be corrected by the eminent panelists here, that it is hard to understand as it has been deliberately made hard to understand. Because when you go to other areas, I'll just give an example of economics. If you want to have a problem with the supply and the demand, not too many people will understand that. The law of diminishing returns, all those are jargons that are in economics. Of course, if you go to engineering and all this, it's the same thing. But because of the history around climate change, including deniers that we are still living with to the present day, it has been dubbed as something that is not understood. But what they actually mean is that it is understood by few people who are willing, and very many others don't want to understand it. So it's more than tree planting. It affects infrastructure, it affects agriculture, it deals with the, seed varieties to protect our health as part of the nutrition. So it's wide-ranging, and that is why long time ago, Rwanda chose to make it a mainstream component of development.
For someone who's not very familiar with the space, we talk about climate finance, that it cuts across sectors, like you just said. And one could kind of have a hard time distinguishing between that and just development projects. So at what point do we say that this is a development project and then this is a climate finance project? Or do the two kind of go in hand? And maybe that's part of the reason why it's difficult for us to really understand what climate finance is.
Thank you for the question. Alex?
I knew I would get into trouble by opening my mouth, but that's okay. I'm used to it. When you are talking of projects, there are different contexts. In the case of Rwanda, I might add, which is, I avoided these terminologies because they are the source of confusion: adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation is simply the impact. Building resilience is trying to deal with the impact even before it happens. Mitigation is about now the practices that we do that result into the gases we talked about, which are the cause. So I hope that is clear. Now, when it comes to the dichotomy of climate and development, in the case of Rwanda, and I dare say for a good part of the developing world, adaptation and resilience are somewhat affiliated with the development. Mitigation, not so directly as it is, because you are talking of technologies, you are talking of, it is somewhat specific. But when it comes to adaptation and resilience, there is a very fine line between climate and development. And that is why increasingly in Rwanda, we are talking about climate and development. Like right now, we have a platform that hopefully at some point will feature in this forum, which is dubbed Climate Development Country Platform. So when it comes to projects, you can distinguish between climate and development, but in instances of climate adaptation, like in agriculture, like in sustainable land management, sometimes it's hard to do that. Because again, when you are planting trees, and part of the reason is again the cross-cutting nature of climate itself. In other words, when you are even growing seed varieties that are climate resilient, what you are doing, you are planting them on the ground, and it is also protecting soils, right? And the soil erosion results into productivity. So it's a moving cycle, and the interconnectedness, you will have to really fight hard to distinguish climate adaptation with development.
So this is exactly why the Catalyst Café, the Knowledge Café, has been developed, is really to ask questions, to get into, you know, the technicality of things without being it too technical. So thank you for the question. Of course, again, if anyone has any questions, feel free. I think this question actually raised something as well, is that sometimes climate finance can feel broad, sometimes too narrow. So today, a lot of people are asking, what is sustainable finance? What is green finance? What is climate finance? So we talked about climate finance. However, Anita, I wanted to go to you. In terms of green finance and sustainable finance, how can we see the difference? Because green finance can be related to solar, sustainable finance is sustainability focused. Is it green finance part of sustainable finance or vice versa? How can we see the difference? How can we understand it? And how can we also link them together?
Thank you, and thank you. I'd like to thank first the Rwanda Green Fund for this. I don't have to worry about wearing heels. It's a Friday, so thank you for this. Climate equals to sustainable for me, really. From where I stand, from where we sit, for us it's about now mobilizing the capital now too. It's not only about development partners, it's not only about the public sector, it's now about how do we bring in investments, how do we mobilize capital to address the issues around reducing emissions, to address issues around helping community adapt to these shocks. I think civil society really talks about how do we think about the Mturaje down there. So for us, it's about mobilizing capital to come and invest in projects that speak to sustainability for us to be able to manage these shocks that come with climate. Today there's rain, in a few minutes it's heavy. So that's how I can address that. For me, climate, when you think about climate finance, like climate sustainability, like the shocks that come with climate, how do we manage that to be able to be sustainable for the long, like manage what comes with the different climate shocks. Yeah.
And maybe to follow up on that, right? Companies, for example, that are also working on their social responsibility, their governance, ESG as a whole, is that something that investors also look into when they're looking into sustainable finance then in this case? Or it's more, is the difference between green finance and sustainable finance, sorry, important for them with that ESG aspect in mind, or not really?
So for really an investor, they're looking to the returns, like what's in for them. It's the money, right? But even the money, you need structures in place, you need governance in place. If you want to, I think for us, for an investor comes in towards the end, because first you need, there's the idea. That's where concessional funding comes in. I think that would be for BRD and all those that support in that area. And then catalytic funding that's coming to now manage the shocks. And then now we go to investors saying, we have gone through all this project is bankable, and come and invest. It has ticked all the boxes. So it's really about, for the investor, it's structures, compliance, so that if you're putting your money somewhere, they're not closing your business when you start. You've at least ticked those boxes. You have the right skills in place, you have the right structures in place, governance is there in the country, and yeah, you're good to go.
Thank you, Anita. That was very clear. And I think it shows that indeed green finance, sustainable finance work hand in hand. But at the end of the day, a project needs to be put in place. The idea needs to come from somewhere. So I think that will lead to our next question in terms of what kind of projects are we then actually talking about? What kind of ideas are actually bankable, financeable, and will be considered when we talk about green finance, climate finance, and sustainable finance? So I would like to go to Yvan, our Chief Strategy Officer at the fund.
Climate finance being accessed, right? It is not free money. It is money that is scarce, right? It is money that has been mobilized, let's say, by, it could be the fund, it could be, REMA or the government at large, and it needs to go into projects, of course, that will deliver on promises, that were sort of put into place when that money was accessed, right? So that has to be in the mind of whoever is trying to access money. It's just that it's because you hear about greenwashing a lot. We have a lot of cases, in which these cases happen, or sometimes people just don't wanting to understand the level of preparedness that comes with accessing that type of money, right? So at the fund, we try to do our best, to first, even it's not just about having the money, it's about educating, right? How is it meant to be accessed? What would you do with that money? How are you supposed to even use it, in a conscious manner? So you talk about sectors. In Rwanda, we have, as I mentioned, we have really clear policies in place and really strategies that have prioritized what sectors are being affected, right? And as a government entity, we are very keen to respond to what is seen as urgent, right? What is seen as prioritized. So just to name a few, and I will try to touch on them. We know Rwanda is dependent, at least the workforce is highly dependent on agriculture. So we really focus on that as one of our big sector. We're trying to instill climate smart agriculture practices. That means that how do we keep innovating? Because again, innovation is part of the things also that we look for, right? Money is scarce, and we want ideas that can be tested, that can be realized, that can be scaled as well. So that's really into the sort of the spectrum that we have. They will have, I mentioned agriculture. We have also infrastructure. Rwanda is very keen on developing infrastructure, but then again, the infrastructure is very sensitive to climate shocks, right? We could be spending so much money on buildings and bridges, but if they're not climate proofed, what happens is you wasted all the efforts and the money and the time put in those projects. So we're really into our infrastructure. Then it goes into so many sectors, right? We're talking of mobility, right? Big, for such an urban center as Kigali that is growing fast, right? We're looking to how to manage that flow and the movement of people around the city and around even the country at large. And here, I'm sure you've seen on the road and some things that we have done. We've financed mobility companies from motorbikes, and we have Nick here that will speak about that in great detail. E-buses. I think something again, and it's something that everybody will see soon enough, is the government is really trying to prioritize buses, right, as the main primary way of public transportation because of its benefits, right? It's consolidated. It's if the network, of course, works, it's a really good alternative to using either your own vehicle or individual way of mobility. But then again, it's like I mentioned, it's sectors are broad, right? They have to have a climate rationale, as you already said, but they're really into the priorities of the government, and that's what we try to do.
Thank you, Yvon. And you touched upon the private sector. So are we only looking into funding government institutions, or can also a small entrepreneur, a small company reach out to get funding?
Anybody, any organization, of course, as I mentioned, or individual, right, has the right first, right, to access, money. But as I mentioned, and I speak on behalf of the fund, we do have requirements, right? And that requirement speaks of checks and balances that need to be in place so that the money is not going to go to, as I mentioned, to waste, or is going to be used efficiently, right? And I mentioned it's a process that requires a lot of awareness, right? And I think that's something we hear all the time. There's not enough work being done in how we explain and how we touch the public at large, right? It seems it's only for a very niche group, right? But that's not the case, right? We do have at the fund facilities where the government can access money, where the private sector can access money, where civil society, NGOs can access money, right? And businesses of whatever size can accept, right? But then again, it will go into there will be, of course, an analysis being put in place to understand what can be absorbed by the said person that's requesting the money or the organization, so that again it fits if it's fit for purpose, right? It doesn't go into something that will be doomed to fail, but because we're really into making the most and exhaust the possibilities with the money that we have. So the money is open. There is always and also money is available when we have it. That's another thing, right? So you have to understand at least, and that's just not the fund. It could be banks. It could be, banks is a bit different because again, banks have returns, so they're able to use their own resources. How it works, at least at the fund, it's that we are deploying grants mostly, right? And that has its, I would say, its lifeline because it's we're really impact forward and focused. So that money will have its lifetime, right? And might not come back to the fund. So we can only be as effective as the money that we mentioned. So that's the work that we do, to always avail enough financing so that we can reach a broader amount of people.
Thank you. That's helpful because it shows that, climate finance is not just about definitions. It's really about real projects moving through a whole system. And fair enough, we also need to talk about the money. Where does it all come from? And again, it's not indefinite, obviously. So Nick, perhaps you can help us unpack the money discussion. So people usually think it's donor funding, it's grants, etc. But the reality is much broader. So what kind of capital are actually parts of the climate finance ecosystem?
Thank you. Well, first, thank you to our hosts for this opportunity and to our distinguished panel. I think it's helpful, at least for me, to think of climate finance no different from ordinary finance, but applied to climate assets, projects or companies. So in both ordinary and climate finance, we have essentially three types of financing. We have grants. So grants are given in order to have impact, purely in order to have impact. They're not expecting any return at all. That is the definition of a grant. Then there's another layer, which is concessional capital. This may be provided by development banks, climate funds, where impact is essential, yes, but there's also an expectation of a return, of a commercial return. But that commercial return may not be very large. It will vary depending on the provider. So that's sort of this middle layer where both impact and return are sort of driving thesis behind the investment. Then there is this third layer, which is private capital. And Anita said it, private capital, private investors, the return is non-negotiable. They will only invest if there is a commercial return on that investment. Now, some of those investors may also have a climate focus and may also demand impact. Others will not. Now, that's where the distinction between ordinary and climate finances will determine. So these three layers: grants, concessional capital, and private capital. Now, the largest of those is private capital. If you look at the total investable capital in the world, the largest is private capital, but it's very hard to access from day one. So the reason that grants are so visible is because by the nature of the sector, climate finance is still a fairly even climate sort of awareness is still fairly young, and it's developing, and therefore we have lots of technologies which are not yet proven over the medium to long term. We have markets which are new markets where we don't yet have, again, sort of a mature sense of the supply demand regulatory environments. All to say that climate finance can be more risky than ordinary finance because it's not yet matured, in terms of technologies and markets. Therefore, private capital, those who are determined to receive a commercial return, are somewhat reticent to step in day one. But the grant providers, of course, are, because they're not looking for a return. They want to have impact. So the grants and the concessional capital, we put them together and we call them catalytic capital. Catalytic capital because they are to catalyze the project, company, or asset to a point where it becomes investable by private capital. Yeah, so they're a transitional source of financing, and if I mentioned, they are finite. In fact, they're reducing around the world. So we have to look at how do we move along the cycle from financing with grants, concessional, and then into private capital. Now, what is important, of course, is that catalytic capital can be provided in two different ways, and it's important to make this distinction. There is a sequential provision of catalytic capital. So what do I mean by that? So if we take a company or a project or an asset, it may be on day one fully funded by grants or fully funded by a combination of grants and concessional capital. Once that asset, project, or company is mature, then that capital can step away, and it can be funded by private capital. So that's a sequential process, yes, where the private capital comes in at the end of a timeline if the grant and concessional has been successful. But there is a second method of deploying catalytic capital, and this, I think, is increasingly of focus to government and indeed to the sector around the world, which is where we have layered financing. What we mean by that is that actually grant and or concessional capital co-invest with private capital on day one. Yeah, so it's sort of stacked capital. So from day one, private investors will sit alongside grant and concessional capital providers, but they'll have a different risk-return profile. So, of course, in those early days, there may be losses. Well, that will be structured, the instrument will be structured such that those losses will be borne by the grant and or concessional capital, but they will receive fewer returns, yes, and vice versa for the private capital. So, as you can see, we are increasingly developing more sophisticated structures. But in basic terms, we should think about the space just like we do in ordinary finance: grant, concessional, and private. And really, it's a journey. How do we unlock that private capital? Because that private capital, as I said at the beginning, is by far the largest pool of capital, and it will always be there. Grant, concessional, it is time-bound and it's reducing. Thank you.
As a non-economist, I think that was very, very clear. So thank you for that. And it brings us to our next question, which is actually about, you mentioned as well, climate finance not being mature enough and the risks around it, right? So I believe there's a regulatory perspective that we also need to look into, which is why I'm going to look at our DJ Juliet from REMA. So from the regulatory perspective, right, how do safeguards help ensure climate finance is directed towards climate-aligned projects?
Thank you so much for this space, first of all. And I feel like we still need more of these Catalyst sessions. They'll be regular, thank you. Yeah, there's still more terminologies to be decoded, lots of, still more complicated words there. And let me start with what the young lady there asked. I think the question was, at what point do we draw the line between a development project and a sustainable project? And I believe that every development project must be sustainable. And again, this is where the terminologies that Ileve pointed at and Alex in the beginning, what is sustainable? What is green finance? What is green? What is sustainable finance? What is ESG? There are so many. There are really many. And even when you're trying to understand one, another one comes. Yeah, so you take so long to understand that. But at the core, I think it's been defined that sustainability, yes, profits, but also the benefits to us, to the people, now and for future generations. And that's where it starts from, and that's what REMA believes, that every project or every investment must focus at the quality of life of the people, not only now, but for future generations. And that means a lot when it comes to the investments that you need to have. You need to have the right technologies, but to start with, you must embrace that. You must embrace that sustainability does not only mean profits. I think that's the traditional financing. Traditional financing we talk about for every project has to give me returns. The quicker the returns, the better. And then where we come in is what if the returns are going to cause more impact, more effects to the people to start with, or to the environment? What if those impacts are actually irreversible? What if they're going to even cost us more than the profits that you made? Because now that's when the regulators come in. If you're reviewing a project, then you're going to look at all that. And for it to be viable in our lenses, all those boxes have to be ticked. We have to make sure that, yes, you're going to invest this, but the profits are not going to be much less than the damage you're going to cause. I'm looking for softer words. They're not really coming. Yeah, but sometimes we have projects that have given us profits that we need, but then we come back to actually spend more to rehabilitate what has been destroyed. The Rwanda Green Fund understands that those are the projects that they are investing in. Literally, we got profits in something, but now we are going to spend more to. Yeah, so from the regulatory perspective, that's what we are looking at, and we have tools to help us monitor that. That's when the Asians come in. That's why we do compliance monitoring. But when it comes to where this compliance monitoring comes to align with the climate finance, I think it's climate finance now comes in to actually help the developers now be able to invest in these in the technology, which shouldn't be additional. Unfortunately, it should be part of the investments that you thought about even in the beginning. So we got a relief from from the compliance monitoring side. We got a relief when we started seeing Rwanda Green Fund and other funding institutions come in to actually support these initiatives. So if I want to do a more sustainable tree, then I know that I will get some resources to help me reduce the burden of the amount that I was supposed to invest in all that. So it's a journey, but it's a journey in the right direction, at least that Rwanda is on, because we have decided long time, like Alex said, long time, that all developments need to be sustainable. And we need more tools to actually be able to measure this, because measuring returns is the easiest. I'll see cash flow and I'm like, okay, I've made it. But when it comes to looking at it as a sustainable project, then I need to measure what was the carbon avoided. Do I have the right tools? Do I have the expertise needed? All work in progress. How do we measure the benefits of climate smart agriculture? Am I looking at only the trees that that Joseph was talking about? And yes, I'm dressed in green today for this event. Yes, so am I looking at the trees alone, or am I actually going ahead to see the life that has been restored in the soil? I'm looking at much more than just the single tree. It cannot be isolated. It has to be an integrated approach for me to impact positively the quality of life, and the trees in this sense will help me clean up the air, whether rich, whether poor, whether rural or urban, you need clean air to breathe. And then it goes more than that, the soils have to be productive. So what have you used as inputs for your fields? And so I'm looking at that. But do I know how to measure that? Do I know how to measure productive soil? Do I know how to measure the losses made from the erosion that we had in the beginning? So only to say that it's very complex, and it has to be polished as we move forward. We need to have the right tools to measure. We need to be able to have a conversation between the us here at the Catalyst Cafe, but also the bankers. So if the private sector has the biggest chunk of money, and there is still a big belief that for it to be sustainable, it has to be profitable, and profitable means dollars on the account, then we have more cafes to take and to invite and to have this, like shared and understood and have that shift from the traditional way of thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think you touched about something very important, is impact versus money, which is actually our next segment, so that's perfect. But before we actually go to our next segment, I wanted to ask all of the speakers if you have anything you wanted to add to the discussion that we're having right now.
Thanks to Nick for a very clear layout of the landscape. This would be a question, but it is for another conversation. But in the stacking, we also need to understand the up and coming terminology, innovative financing, which refers to the bonds. We have some that have happened here. We also need to understand other forms of finance, like carbon finance. It could be part of the 3 layers, but increasingly it's taking a category of its own. Biodiversity offsets for those who are.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The message I want to put across is that, yes, some of the initiatives that could help to address issues around climate change, at times it's not only money, it's knowledge. Now, if I've at least been to 150 schools, both primary and high school. Some of these schools, their compounds are totally dry. So how do you empower young students towards admiring nature? They shouldn't admire nature because they've come to Nyandungu or the recent Gikondo if it gets finished. It has to start at an early age. Huh? Because it has taken time. So, yeah. So ever since they started. So we need, my sister here from government side, what are you doing with the Ministry of Education? Have you set up a program where schools can be using biogas? The students will be learning school gardens, smart agriculture, then planting trees and having a green environment. Thank you.
I think we have the right person to answer that question. If I may ask Fidel from the ministry.
There are works that we're trying to do. I think what we call it environment mainstreaming in a way. So we're trying to work with not only the Ministry of Education, but other government institutions to see how we can, within the work that we do, improve our climate resilience and our sustainability in a way. Yes, it is true that the schools compounds can be better, and that is a quick win that we can have through our various institutions, and we started, but there's still work to be done. But I'll touch on the one thing that you mentioned there that has to do with clean cooking. How do we make sure that when we're cooking for our students, and schools do that on a regular basis at scale throughout the school year? How do we make that more efficient and more climate friendly? If you look at the cost of switching for a school from a kitchen that they have to a kitchen that is going to use, let's say, LPG, for example, that can cost you around 50 million Rwandan francs. If you look at the number of schools that we have, which are around a little over 4,000 schools, you can see how much it would actually take for you to actually switch all the schools, which then means that we need to look for resources to make it happen. Are you going to bringing it back to the question of where do you get the capital? Are you going to get it through those catalytic resources, so grants and concessional loans, or are you going to rely on private capital to implement such a project? If you're going to rely on private capital, then you need to understand what is the return. When we're cooking for schools, what's the return? Who's bearing the cost of it? If most of the cost is coming from the government, I can tell you it's difficult for you to say it's going to be financed by private capital. So we're now looking at the catalytic capital. And to that end, we are working with the Ministry of Infrastructure, the Ministry of Education to put together proposals to leverage those catalytic capitals. So we're trying to raise those resources. It takes time. It takes time. You have to prioritize what you're trying to do. You have to maybe change the business model of how school feeding happens. But all of that is the work that we do in our sector to then say we are using or leveraging climate finance to answer a problem that we have. Have I answered the question?
Thank you very much. That was really good. Any other questions from the audience, actually?
Thank you all speakers for this wonderful conversation. We heard green financing, climate financing, sustainable financing, and I think you made the case for development financing within that sector, within these fields. But I wonder, for a young entrepreneur looking to launch or start their business, how is this conversation relevant to them?
Who would like to take this on?
Thanks, Naomi. I believe we touched on it briefly, but as I mentioned, I want to start even from the context. You know, Rwanda, we're a small nation. I mean, it's 0.001. I think we contribute percentage to carbon emissions, right, in the world. The fact that we're even here talking about how to finance the climate-related issues show that the government takes it very seriously, right? And we are trying our best to, within our limited resources, to respond to to everyone's needs, because again, we are looking at government institutions, large, medium, small, right? And for a young entrepreneur to have an idea, it is something that is of course always considered, right? We have done a lot in the past already, through some of our programs. As I mentioned, we have different facilities. So in our private sector facility, within the fund, we have windows that are much more into taking entrepreneurs, through a program that is just not about money, right? It's about really developing your business proposal, the business case, the climate rationale behind it, to the point where we believe it makes a strong enough case, right? It fits and fulfills all the requirements that we need, but it's that hand-holding part, right, that we recognize and that is necessary. So rest assured that we think about that, that I would say that whole value chain, or that life cycle of businesses, from the very grassroots, level entrepreneur and anyone to, very much more substantial or sizable entities. Yeah. Thank you. And then Alex?
This is a very important question, particularly considering the demographic that is asking the question. Juliet talked about it. It's not only about today, it's about the future. And if our young ones do not think of the future, it would be a problem, Naomi. But there is also an incentive into the conversation here. Nick talked about grants and concessional loans. If the young one is thinking of businesses, the question is, how do they access money that would enhance their profit margin? There is an opportunity in this space we are talking about. And we talked about businesses being expensive, being about the bottom line, which is profits. But it's much more than that, especially when you tie this point with the previous one of, the future of Rwanda, of the world at large. We are at this point because our predecessors didn't make the right choices. The young one should be conscious that we are here to talk about how do we effectively make the right choices for the generation to come.
Being mindful of the next segments.
Yeah, I'm not talking too much, but it's because my late father was a teacher, so I'm a son to a teacher. Yeah, it's very interesting to see a young person interested in this discussion around climate financing. So for the entrepreneurship, I think it's not only looking at money, but there is also an issue of creating jobs, green jobs. Kigali City has around 9,000 hectares of marshlands unutilized, and we have lots of young people around the town who are jobless. They normally go to a place called Kundeji, expecting to be picked and given some odd jobs. So I think from the categories of funding, entrepreneurs can come up with initiatives or proposals for job creation to utilize the unutilized marshlands around Kigali City for smart agriculture, and then create jobs, and you get rich and protect the environment. Thank you.
So, but we have other cafes that are coming up over the next few months, and we'll continue the discussion. It's not over, obviously. It's a lot of discussions. It's a lot of jargon. It's a lot of questions around, the climate finance and how to access it, the green jobs, the clean cooking, etc. So we'll definitely discuss those topics further. But I want to thank the speakers. I want to thank the audience for the questions as well. And please applaud everyone, and please clap for yourselves. And welcome Irebe for segment number 2. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. This was great. It was a great way to start the first edition of the Catalyst Café. It was great conversations, great disruptions. And we heard in that conversation that climate investment is rarely straightforward. Ideas may be strong, impact may be clear, but the path to financing is often complicated, which introduces our next 2 segments. We're going to do a debate. The aim of this debate is to have intellectual, honest, and courageous conversations. I would like to welcome our 2 debaters. I will start with the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Fidel. Welcome. I will also welcome Fabiola Ikirezi, our Climate Finance Analyst at Rwanda Green Fund. So we're about to have a micro debate round. I will explain a little bit about the debate, and then we start. It will be a 2 to 4 minutes debate, and I will introduce a provocation, the theme of the debate, and then one of you will start the draw of one of these cards, and one of you will be for the provocation, and the other one will be against the provocation. Some ground rules is argue the position, not your institution. And you are allowed to disagree with yourself. In fact, that's the point. So before we start, we're going to make it a little bit fun. To choose who will choose their first choice of if they're for or against the provocation, you guys should play rock, paper, scissors. Ladies first? No, right? Okay, no problem. So you can choose. You're for the provocation, and you're against. Okay, so here is the provocation. We should fund bankable projects first. Impact can wait. A little bit more context. Everyone in this room agrees that impact matters, right? But when capital is scarce, when risk committees are cautious, and when balance sheets are tight, what actually comes first? At the moment the check is signed, does impact lead or is it bankability? So, ladies first. Fabiola, you can start as you are for impact can wait.
Thank you, Irebe. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy that I voted this because when I started, I was like, I hope I choose something that I truly believe in, because supporting something you don't believe in can be hard. So usually capital follows risk. There is no investor that before they disperse or before they invest, they look at intentions. They usually look at the risk. And the risk is what investors basically are looking at if they're going to achieve the risk-adjusted returns. So if a project cannot demonstrate any scalability, why would an investor basically deploy money? So it first has to make sense from the coin's perspective, and then impact will for sure come as a result. Otherwise, we might find ourselves crowding out investors because we're putting money into something that doesn't work. So usually, yeah, capital follows risk, not the intentions of impact.
We're in Rwanda, so I'm going to use examples that people are aware of in a way. If you look at, we mentioned the wetlands that we are rehabilitating here. No investor in their right mind, an investor who's looking for a bankable project, would invest in restoring these wetlands. However, as we are finishing them, investors are already lining up to create businesses within the wetlands, bankable businesses within the wetlands. Another example. 5 years ago, someone, I'm seeing Basigo on one of the posters here, they want to do an EV transportation business in Rwanda. They want to, of course, they need capital to start investing. We don't have charging stations. Maybe we also don't have the tax exemption that we advocated for, by the way. You're welcome. And there isn't an ecosystem for them to truly have a bankable project. But now, I'm sure it's a bankable project. But someone had to first de-risk it for it to graduate into a bankable project. There are many more examples of a lot of work that we've been doing. The last one that I will end with is in agriculture. If you look at our Vision 2050, close to 50% of our land is allocated for agriculture. The reality of the topography of our country, they told me to not use technical terms, the country of 1,000 hills. Those hills come with soil erosion. Why? Like someone mentioned, we have more intense rains. That's the impact of climate change that we suffer the most. It's not the quantity of rainfall, it's the impact. How fast does it actually, does the rain fall on our land? So you have more erosion coming up. What's eroded is topsoil. That's the soil that is the most productive in agriculture. Now, if you are supposed to use most of your land for agriculture, and you want to graduate from a low-income country to a medium-income country, and later on even to be a developed country, you need to have a productive agriculture sector. But someone needs to invest in soil erosion control. For you to do 1 hectare of radical terracing, for example, that's what helps us to control soil erosion, you need at least 4 million Rwandan francs for 1 hectare. If you're asking the average farmer, who by the way doesn't even have 1 hectare in the country, to invest in that particular activity before they can then invest in inputs for agriculture, you're asking for them to do something that isn't easy, especially if you're going to use private capital. So there is a role that the government will then have to play to find catalytic investments to first put on the ground so that you can bring a bankable agricultural project and say, now I'm ready to have a business that the likes of BRD and INM and BK can actually finance. I rest my case.
Thank you, PS. Fabiola, do you have anything to add,
Yeah.
to counter?
I think if it was up to me, I would have reframed the question, because perhaps the real question is not bankability versus impact. It's more about who comes in first to take the risk so that it can become bankable. Because at the end of the day, it has to become bankable. Otherwise, impact cannot make sense. It would be a pilot and not anything of impact, because you will be just testing the ground, and then at some point it's not scalable. So to me, it's really hard to say impact versus bankability, and more of who should come in first, as Fidel was saying.
So I'm glad we agree. Have I won?
I guess you won. Thank you both, PS Fidel and Fabiola. Before we go to the next segment, we have entrepreneurs in this room, right? Yes. So you often hear, come back where it is more mature, but growth requires capital. So by a quick show of hands to the entrepreneurs, who believes capital should reward readiness? Capital should reward readiness. What's the other option? You agree? Yeah? Yeah. Who believes capital should create readiness? Yeah. Yes. So, we're going to take a short coffee break as we prepare the next segment, where we unpack this tension and what it really means of how capital moves in Rwanda. So what we just saw in the debate between PS Fidel and Fabiola reflects a very real tension in climate finance. Projects can be necessary, they may be innovative, they may even be aligned with national priorities, but capital can still hesitate. Why? So often, the challenge is not the intention. It is the structure, it's the risk, and it's the sequencing. And simply, sometimes it's who moves first. So for the rest of the conversation, we'll explore how a project moves from a system, from policy alignment to bankability to investment. I will be the moderator for this session. And I'm sorry I'm going to give you my back, but it will be a conversation, so feel free. If you have to disrupt, if you have to interrupt, feel free to join us. So first, I would like to welcome back our Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Fidel. I would also like to welcome back Fabiola, our investment analyst at the Rwanda Green Fund. Yeah. I would like to invite Nick from Kabisa, the co-founder of Kabisa. And I would like to invite Daniel Musafiri from INM Bank. And last but not least, I would like to invite Ali Muvunyi from BRD. So before we start, I wanted to reiterate that this is a conversation. I might be the moderator, but feel free to respond to each other, challenge each other, and also from the audience to challenge the speakers and each other in the crowd. So I will first start at policy level. From the ministry's perspective, when a project is clearly aligned with climate priorities, what makes it move from aligned to nationally strategic?
Thank you. So an aligned project is one that has shared goals with the government. Where do you find our goals? We have national strategies, we have various policies that have policy actions, that have specific goals. So you can say, for example, if part of what we're trying to do is encourage e-mobility. If you have an e-mobility project, you're aligned with our strategies in a way. So we have multiple projects. If you're going to do a land restoration somewhere, you're aligned with our strategies and policies as a government. You become a strategic project when there is a boost to the economy that your project is bringing in terms of, one, you're aligning on multiple goals, but also we can see almost like it becomes, let's call it a, for lack of a better word, a catalytic project within the landscape of projects in the country. An example of it would be, okay, I'm going into government projects here, but I work for the government, so that'll be okay. If you look at the Muvumba Dam that we're building in Nyagatare, that becomes a strategic project. Why? You're building a dam to have artificial storage of water, but then to feed into irrigation, to feed into water supply, and to generate electricity. You need that, especially in the eastern province, because it can easily suffer to climate shocks with rainfall that might not be there when we need it to be there. So that becomes a strategic project. So if you have something of that sort, then your project, and it can also happen in the private sector, where you have a project that becomes a strategic project at the national level. So if someone decides, for example, that they want to do public transportation between Kigali and all other districts, and they're going to do it leveraging e-mobility and so on and so forth, that can easily graduate to a strategic level project, depending on the scale of what they want to do and the various boxes that they're ticking that relate to the various targets that the government has. It was a very boring answer, and I hope it's the only boring answer. Thank you.
No, it's actually not boring. It's clear to what we continue saying in climate finance. And Ali, moving from national priority with the examples that Piers provided to financing as the Development Bank of Rwanda, at what point does a climate project become appropriate for BRD's balance sheet?
Yes, thank you. So a project is appropriate for a balance sheet. If you look at mainly three things. The first one being that the project has to be aligned with our strategic priorities. And looking at our mandate and our nature as a development bank, there's certain areas of intervention that we invest in or we provide financing to. And in addition to that, again, given our mandate as a development bank, to also not disrupt the local financial market, and also not to compete with other financial institutions such as the commercial banks, MFIs, and SACCOs, the project has to first align with our own priorities. Secondly, it's also on the manageability of the risk that you are taking. And for this one, it's a bit broad because we go beyond the traditional financial and credit risk that commercial or other financial institutions look at. We also incorporate additional consideration like is your project ESG compliant? What is the economic and social impact? What are the jobs you're intending to create with the financing that we are forwarding to you? And also lastly, with also a new, I would say, a strategy that we adopted, now project also has to align with ESG compliance. For example, if a typical project comes in, not only do we consider its financial viability, does it have a strong business model that reflects repayment, but also in terms of now complying with environmental protection, social aspects and consideration. So these are the key aspects that we look at for us to consider a project to be appropriate for our balance sheet.
Thank you. So going to that, you said that you have your priority sectors. As let's say if I'm an entrepreneur, what would be my two or three must-haves that change the conversation from this is promising to this is financeable?
Thank you. I would say that the first must-have is to have a good or a sound financial and business model, because at the end of the day we are providing a loan, so this loan has to be repaid. So that's the first consideration that we look at. In addition to that is that we're also providing development finance, so we also need to look at the impact that for each rand and franc that we are providing to you, what is the return not only on the fiscal side but also on the social aspects, environmental aspects, what are the jobs you intend to create, what are the environmental compliance that you have to consider. So these are the two, I would say, main must-have that you have to consider, in addition to the normal strong shareholding, strong organization structure or strong management of the company, because at the end of the day you also have to ensure the sustainability of this project, and you have to show that once BRD exits in this arrangement or this partnership, the company or the project will be able to run in the future as well.
Thank you. Going from that, we've heard from the development bank, but now from the perspective of a commercial bank, Daniel, why are commercial banks, including INM, increasingly interested in the ESG and green finance sector?
Thank you. Maybe I'll introduce myself. My name is Daniel Msafiri, Chief Commercial Officer for INM, which means I oversee the bank business lines across the entire bank. And for us as INM, I think it's one to support what Fidel said. It's a national priority, so we have to play. That's where capital is shifting. So we have to position to be able to attract that capital. But we're also working with partners that are sort of saying, where is the impact, what is your role in ESG, and what are you doing as a bank? And lastly, we've seen demand. So there is capital to be deployed. I think if you remember in 2023, BRD put up a sustainable linked bond, which was oversubscribed, I think 110%. They came back in 2024, still oversubscribed 130%. And they're coming back 2026. And as I&M Bank, we will still invest into BRDs and significantly invest almost 10% of whatever they're trying to raise. So as a bank, we need to position one for the medium term, but also for long term, and be able to attract capital and be able to support the Rwandan priorities. Fidel spoke about wetlands. They played a role, we played a role in terms of financing. And maybe our role is not to de-risk it, but our role is to say, how do we support the contractor? How do we give performance guarantees to the World Bank, if I remember correctly? So some of these we're already doing and we're willing to do so. So I think for the bank, for I&M, is really strategic positioning to attract capital and to be able to finance the national priorities.
Thank you. So based on that, when climate projects approach you, what is the biggest barrier you encounter? Are they too small, too early, too uncertain, or simply not packaged in an investable way? And this is a question to both of you, as the bankers.
So I think the projects are not too small or not interesting. The projects, I think the biggest challenges is that there's a lot of greenwashing. And what I mean by this is that projects tend to be packaged as green, but not really green. So when you look at the actual impact or try to measure impact, you don't see it. But also I think entrepreneurs are not yet ready. Today, the likes of EVs have sort of progressed, But if you go into the agribusiness space, you don't see a lot of activity. If you go into energy, you don't see a lot of activity, apart from the mobility companies, which we're supporting. So there's three things. So one is there commitment for entrepreneurs in terms of projects? Two, are they bankable projects? So which means, again, as a commercial bank, we look at a return. Can they generate a return for the shareholders and still pay back the bank? And then three, of course, is collateral. As a bank who's in a regulated environment, we still look at collateral. But I'm happy to note that as I&M, at least we've gone sort of to de-risk this collateral issue, and we've onboarded partners. So these are DFIs who are coming in to give us instruments to de-risk the collateral bit. So when I speak about DFIs, this is the likes of FMO, who are giving us guarantees up to 95% to support green financing. We have Propaco, who's giving us about 80% to support green financing. So that we don't ask you, entrepreneurs in the room, and I think I remember that you asked, how do I access financing? And I think for us it's to say, if a partner like Rwanda Finance or Rwanda Green Fund sort of gives you a grant and risks your project, we will put in without a requirement for collateral, so that then you can scale your project. Because the biggest issue for young entrepreneurs is that there's no collateral. And that's the biggest barrier for commercial banks. So at least with partners like Propaco and the likes of FMO, we address the collateral issue, and now you look at scalability and the return bit. So I think we're doing pretty well as a bank. But we need more projects. We've only seen EVs. We've not seen agribusiness. We've not seen change in energy mix. We've not seen forestry. So I think we're also lacking a pipeline. And to confirm this, you'll notice that UNDP put out a tender to sort of attract people who can give us a pipeline, but also address the challenge now as a traditional banker. Most of the mindset is still very traditional. So we need to build capacity, and we need help from the Green Fund. How do we build capacity within the bank, within our credit analysis, within our policies, so that we're able to adapt to the changes we're seeing? And we need help there, I must confess. Thank you.
Thank you, Irebe. Thank you, Daniel. I think you raised my interest when you talked about the wetlands, that you're also playing, and not playing directly to us, government, REMA maybe, but I know that you're working with the contractor who is actually doing the work on the ground. And I want, in practical terms, how are you playing? Are you maybe reducing the interest on that contractor because they are working on a sustainable project? Yeah, how do you even measure that this is a sustainable project? I know my PS has done that. Do you have the right tools? But clearly, how do you support the people who are doing this job in the wetlands? Thank you.
Okay. So I think it's a very difficult question. Maybe I'll start with the easiest. And in terms of measuring an impact, that as a commercial bank, we've not been able to address. And we rely on the contractor to give us reports and to work with you to provide us measurable impact that they've done. And I think I remember there's a transaction, not without saying a name, that came to us, and it was around carbon emissions. And they had a contract, and again, package it properly, you sell it to Total, Total will pay you. Straightforward. You can see where you're going to get paid. Now, the biggest question was, can I measure these carbon credits and convert them into financial metrics? And I couldn't do that. And I think when I asked around, the only firm that could measure that was out of South Africa. And which means I had to incur additional cost to hire a firm to be able to measure that, so that I can be comfortable that whatever they sell to Total is compliant, or they're compliant. Now, to answer your question on how we play, luckily for the wetlands, yes, we work with the contractor. I think what we did for them was really to drop the collateral issue. So we said, you need an advance payment guarantee to the World Bank. You need a performance guarantee to guarantee this project. And these are huge sums, I'm sure you know. And we said, okay, fine. As a role, we will not ask for your usual buildings and give us assets and all that. So we just relied on, one, it's a national priority. Two, it's properly funded by the World Bank. And what is my risk? I can issue guarantees, World Bank will still pay. And I can give advance. I just make sure that it goes to the project. And I know we know the party playing, and I'm very comfortable. Then we issued them in excess of $10 million towards the wetlands. So that's how we played in a practical term.
I have another question for you. You talked about greenwashing, projects that are greenwashing. I think we as government through KIFC, the green taxonomy. That is supposed to be our dictionary for what we consider green in Rwanda. How often do you guys rely on it to check that a project that is being submitted to you for investment is actually green? Or do you just look at it and just say, it's greenwashing? Or do you actually refer to the taxonomy on a regular basis?
So luckily as I&M, we were part of KFC in co-creation of the green taxonomy, and we understand it very well. But I think the work is, do entrepreneurs understand it? I'll understand it as a commercial bank, but then when I'm screening projects, do entrepreneurs really understand that? And that's the biggest challenge we're facing. So we tend to turn away projects because there's no understanding. We, the commercial banks, understand it because we're part of the co-creation, but has there been sensitization to the entrepreneurs to actually go and refer to the green taxonomy for their projects that when they come to be, I don't have to turn them back? Or now, let's also address it differently. Can we put up a mechanism where we bring them to speed? Maybe they're just missing a few things. And once they twitch those few things, we can look at it. And maybe this is where the Green Fund can come in to help us. But yes, we understand it. They don't understand it. Who's going to bridge that? As a commercial bank, it will be very difficult for me to bridge it. But we have partners who I think can come into it. And I think they're creating for us a pipeline. We're working with the Rwanda Green Fund. I think Agritech for Rwanda is an initial one that we launched with them the other day. We're getting the pipeline. We'll support them. But at least there's a pipeline coming from people who have vetted them and analyzed them. And then we will put a balance sheet and lend to them. So I think the whole synergy around partnerships and around working together, because it's a new space. It's a new space for commercial banks, new space for development finance. There's a player in between. How do we all work together to support this new space? And I think we're willing to do that.
I think there's a disconnect. So you mentioned that institutions, Ministry of Environment is talking to Ministry of Infrastructure and all that. But meanwhile, you're not talking to us, the business people. Our projects, we can completely de-risk them. We've proven them over the last 10 years. They're commercially viable. We put on our own collaterals. Some of these things we can actually offload from you guys while you focus on the other that are more pressing. And actually, they're very, very advanced. We have a fairly big pipeline, and it's very, very well advanced, working with commercial banks. We're looking at around maybe 1,000 schools now, and it's fairly advanced, fully secured, traditional instruments. Hopefully, whatever is happening in the background will catch up, and we take it to the next level. So that is that. I wanted to clarify that part. Another quick one, I wanted to quickly ask Daniel, how as a commercial bank, how does all this grant money, we want to invest in green transport, mobility. We have the collaterals to put up front. We know they can make money. I mean, there's no question about it. But there's been an influx of this grant money that I feel sometimes crowds out private investment. And the conversation keeps on happening between government to government institutions, and actually us, the private people, are rarely on the table. So how can we increase more of that? And Daniel, how much does it affect your business? Because he cannot touch anything that Grant is chasing. I know many young entrepreneurs who want to go into solar. They will raise their own money. She asked a very good question. How do young entrepreneurs enter this space? For me as an investor, the rule of thumb is to avoid where grant money goes. Otherwise, you'll burn your fingers. So it's really messy, but we need to have more private sector conversations and private people around the table, and really solutions are available. Thank you.
Do I answer that? So I think grant money, it depends on what you use the grant money for. And for me, it's what I call project preparation. So if you want to bring a project and scale it with private money or commercial bank money, I think your grant money should be used to prepare your project. And I'll just give a case in hand. I've just seen Basigo. Basigo had to test the model before it would be scaled by the commercial banks. And if they got, I don't know if they did, but if they used the grant money to say, okay, we'll bring in the balances, we'll test the cash flows, we'll predict the cash flows. And today, and government I think has supported with the policy, today we were supporting Basigo to actually bring in more fleet. Now, once we bring in the fleet, then you give it to operators. So they started as an operator, if I'm not wrong. Today there's EcoFleet, which is the main operator. Basigo brings in the buses, but the role is changing now to say, okay, I have access to where buses are manufactured. Let me bring in a pool, and then let me give other small SMEs to come and take in 2-3 buses, and then rent them to EcoFleet, because there's predictability on cash flow. So I think for grant money doesn't compete with the commercial bank really. I think entrepreneurs need to say, how do I use grant money to prepare my project for the commercial banks to scale it? And I think that should be the role of grant money, because it's limited. But a private money like us, I don't think it's limited. We have quite sizable capital to deploy.
I think this is when, thank you for your answers, Daniel, and for your questions, Libo. This is where we bring in Fabiola, representing the Rwanda Green Fund. You sit between the National Strategic Plan and the financeable mandate. So in one sentence, what does catalytic capital mean in practice? And then in practical terms, what does Rwanda Green Fund intervene to remove friction so a project can move through the system? So just like the example Daniel provided.
Thank you. I think that question also takes us back to the second segment on who takes the risk first. And in terms of what the Rwanda Green Fund is doing to remove the friction, I'll maybe say of 3 frictions. One is the proof of concept. Second is the structuring. And third is the scale-up capital. Maybe if I touch on the proof, RGF is this. We play a role in proving the concept. I believe when EVs started in Rwanda, we were among the first players to actually finance at least the first 5 motorbikes to see if EVs actually work on the hills, the charging system, and we provided grants to actually prove the concept. And this is where even many players started coming in the picture. After proving the concept, which happens across the sectors, I just gave an example of EV, but there might be other innovations, technologies that are coming up in the ecosystem that needs the proof of concept and scaling up. And then we first come on that layer. And then the second layer now is how do you support the ventures to actually structure, be it in the financial structuring, governments related, the business model. And that's where we have our growth capital, if I can say, because now you've proved the concept, but now you have to take another step on growing. And this is where we introduce various instruments, including the recoverable grant, which is now that you're able to make money and you can be able to pay back at least the principal amount from the starters with no interest. And then we are also exploring the equity financing, which is patient capital and allows ventures to grow. And the third is the scale-up capital. And this is where, because as the Rwanda Green Fund, our role is to de-risk, but also enable other players to come in the picture, as the colleague from I&M was explaining. And this is where we ensure the follow-on capital comes in, because that's when you actually say that, oh, this business is actually now bankable because it was able to mobilize funds from commercial players who see it as viable and as a scalable business. So I think those are the 3 frictions. And in follow-on, we make sure that we work with partners. They mentioned about the partnership we have with the banks, which makes me touch on the question that Liban asked. Our role, even in Ireme Invest, we're trying to evolve and work with the banks because we realize that that's where, as he mentioned, the money is there in the banks and it's scarce on the grant side. Now, how do we blend it so that we don't create competition, but actually our pipeline that we've proved the concept, we've structured, and it's ready for follow-on, how do we hand it over to the banks and other investors, commercial investors, so that they can come in the picture and scale it up? So that's how we come in. That's catalytic capital. That's what we provide. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabiola. So basically what you mean is that the Rwanda Green Fund is the middle point between the idea to the bank.
Yes.
Thank you. So now I want to hear we've heard from the bankers, from the fund, from the ministry, but we haven't heard from the people who actually get the money, the entrepreneurs. And Nick, take us to the moment before getting support. What was the biggest not yet you heard from financiers or partners?
I just realized I probably have asked half the people in this room for help or money at some point. So thank you all for the continued support. I think everyone who's tried to start a business can relate to this. I've been said no to, I can't even count how many times I've been said no to. When I first came to Rwanda, people said, hey, drones won't work. Right now, it's one of the largest national drone system. We said, oh, a hotel on Muhazi won't work. It's going decently well. And let me give you an example of this. 2022, how many of you guys owned or had friends that owned an EV here? Anyone? Raise your hands? No? Okay. Today, how many of you own or have friends that own an EV here? Let's see those hands up high. How many of you bought from Kapisa? No, I'm just kidding. I won't ask you that. But can everyone raise their hands real quick again? How many of you guys own or have friends that own an EV? Almost everyone here. That's 3 years, guys. Isn't that insane? 3 years from zero to now. If you go outside in this parking lot, there's like 4 of them here. Right? And so you asked me how many times have we been said, like, what do we do with the not yet? We get that all the time. And I think that I go back to my first point. Like, I've asked half of you guys in this room for help or support. Like, it's a part of every company's journey. And without Green Fund, I have to say thank you to all you guys as well, INM, BRD. We wouldn't have been here and got to where we are. Hey, listen, we're not the only ones in this space right now, but yeah, the not yet has been constant. Even now, after there's so many EVs, we still get it, and so it's part of the journey, and we are reliant on the support of these type of funds and these type of people in this space, from government. I mean, honestly, one of the biggest things that have come from that got us to where we are is the government policy, right? If we weren't able to have the government policy, we wouldn't be competitive in this space. So yeah, lots of not yets, lots of no's, but we are where we are because people, one group, one government, believed that we could do it.
Yeah. And so in the not yets that you received, is it demand risk? Is it unit economics? Is it infrastructure constraint? Or is it unfamiliarity with the model?
You should ask these guys. We have 2 applications with these guys right now.
You can answer.
They can answer for me. But maybe I can summarize. I think, listen, there's all these, it's just risk, right? And I've heard everything. Unit economics, we've proven that out. Scale, we've gone to scale. It's just, I think there's understanding the risk profiles, and I've learned that people won't believe it until they see it, right? And that's what we've been trying to do is, again, Green Fund helped us out to show people that it's possible, and then now we're here. So yeah, I mean, it's all the above. And one thing that I would commend everyone in this room for being here on and supporting this is that all it takes is this one big player to come and say, hey, we believe in you, right? And then another one will come, and another one will come, right? And that's one of the reasons I love building here in Rwanda, because all it takes is one. Government's nice. If the government believes in you, it can happen. But yeah, it's all the above. I can't pin it down to one, but I would ask my my fellow green climate people here what that is. But it's never really only one thing, right? It's how do you shape that whole story? And yeah, sometimes it's, hey, your repayment rate is gonna take too long, right? But what I love is that you can always find ways around it.
Now, going from the Rwanda Green Fund, as you have received some support from the Rwanda Green Fund, what has changed after you received that catalytic support? Did it unlock other investors? Did it de-risk your business? Did it improve your terms or accelerate scale? Tell us more about the impact you had from the Rwanda Green Fund.
Huge. I mean, I have to be remiss if I won't mention Tony over there. He's been a big supporter from the Green Fund. BRD is coming in, and INM has also been helping us. All these opened up, I think, because of the Green Fund. I don't think we would be where we are if Green Fund didn't help us get that catalyst up front. And really, Tony there spent many months with us, refining the model, refining it to make it fit all the criteria. And that process also helped us think about it differently. I think you were saying about impact and how I actually think a lot of entrepreneurs do understand the impact, by the way, that they need to show, but it's really tough as an early stage company, right? Like when you only have maybe a dozen units, whatever it is, farms or cars or whatever, it's quite tough to show impact because you're in the single digits, right? So I think working with Green Fund and the climate space folks have helped us really refine that model a bit more. So, I mean, the last thing I'll say is, yeah, I mean, look at how many people raise their hand right now, right? Like, I think that was in large part because a fund here took a bet and said, hey, this is really interesting. We'd like to bet on you guys. And I think that shouldn't go underestimated. It's a really powerful thing that doesn't really exist in many other countries that we're looking at.
Thank you. One last question. If you had to name one friction point that still exists, what is it?
No, there's so many, guys. Listen, Rwanda has been really great to me in terms of the policies, the ecosystem, all the entrepreneurs in this room, and all the people interested in climate. I will say, like, financing is the biggest friction, right? Like, I think when you get to a scale where things are looking good, actually, I won't even say it's financing, yes, but speed to access it. Speed. Like, I think we're now opening Kabisa up in 3 other countries right now because of a lot of the work that we've done here. Like, now they've looked at financing in other places, Rwanda is like, so it's pretty fast, but for people like me, I'm like, I want to go faster. And so the big friction, is I know the money is there, but it's how do we speed this up? And not only for us, but a lot of climate entrepreneurs is how do you open up this space? Because Rwanda's had a lot of really good wins in the climate space. So why are we not doubling down on this and moving faster? So that would be my question to the group.
Yeah. Actually, I have one last question. What would you advise? You have a success story with the different institutions that are here. What would you advise entrepreneurs who want to go in this space but who are scared or are too scared for the different paperwork that they have to do? They're too scared that they won't make it because of the speed that you're talking about. What would you advise these entrepreneurs to do?
That's a great question. So in my personal capacity, I've invested in a lot of different startups here as well. I mean, good entrepreneurs. Listen, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I think people can agree with that. But for those that do want to do it, like just continue to stick with it. You're gonna get said no to 1 million times. You're gonna go approach each one of these banks and they're gonna be like, no, sorry. And you just have to keep going. That's my honest advice. And if you really believe and you have the conviction, you, like I said in the beginning, all you need to do is find one person that believes in you, and that's enough to get you to the next person, to the next person, and next person, right? Yeah. And so on that note, I would also advise all of you, Kabisa has gone bigger, but there are so many people that started where we were 3 years ago, and they all require your support. Big companies, small companies, especially the small entrepreneurs. I think I've recruited and hired over 1,000 people here in Rwanda. Through all my different entities, right? And I've met some of the most talented, impressive entrepreneurs. The first person I hired at Zipline went to go get his master's of robotics engineering at Stanford and then went to go get his MBA at Harvard. Wow. I had to go to Namrambo to convince his grandma to work with us because he was still in school. I mean, that's the talent that exists here. And you have amazing entrepreneurs, but sometimes they don't find the right match where you get that one person to say, yeah, I believe in you. So I would encourage all of you to think about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to challenge the audience for a moment. Does anyone have questions for our speakers who are sitting here or in the crowd. And yeah, does anyone? Fred?
Thank you all for the great panel. My question is mostly around, I guess I'll ask Fabiola and everyone else with catalytic funding capabilities. I'm curious, we've heard about catalytic projects being essentially needed, especially the funding needed. I'm curious, how do you assess, or when do you know that, okay, this project has now become successful, no more catalytic funding needed, let's go on to the commercial finance, the INMs and other investors. I'm curious, how do you assess, do you have a metric that you actually follow, or how do you know that those projects have now become successful to that point? If I could follow up to that, thanks. I've heard, and I'm sure many people here have heard, that Rwanda, in terms of ecosystem, government usually does a lot of hand-holding to startups. Whereas when you go to other countries, government doesn't really play a role. So the question is, for PS, I'm curious, have you heard those statements, and are they true? Do you think like government does a lot of hand-holding? If so, why? Are we going to reach a point where startups essentially kind of fend for themselves?
I don't think I've heard, to the first part of your question, I haven't heard that personally. But looking around at the landscape that we have and the ecosystem that we have in the financial sector, and also in climate finance, yes, sometimes we do a lot of that. Part of it is just general capacity building. You have a lot of small businesses that are running, but you'll find that they don't have everything they need to have from a fiduciary perspective for a bank to actually finance them. So sometimes the hand-holding is just helping them create those structures in their businesses so they can be bankable. It's not that the idea is not good itself. It's not that it doesn't make financial sense. It's just that capacity building to make sure that they have the governance necessary to be financed by a commercial bank. So if that is then called hand-holding, so be it, but it's needed at the moment. Hopefully we'll get to a point where there are enough, I don't know, like business consultants in the private sector who will help do that, let me call it again, hand-holding with businesses to make sure that they are then ready to access private capital. So I think it's part of the growth that we need to have as a country. If I could wake up today and be like, okay, this is my idea for a business, let me start it, and I need to then hire X number of consultants to build the governance structures for me to then be able to access private capital, you find that maybe you need more money than you actually have. So someone has to be willing to incur that cost so that you can access the private capital, because they believe ultimately in what you're going to be able to deliver, not only in terms of impact from a climate resilience or mitigation perspective, but also from a job creation and just basic economics perspective. So it's part of the process right now. Our hope, let me not say our hope, at least my hope personally, is that we graduate from it and the government no longer has to do that. And when RGF has a particular project like Ireme Invest, for example, they don't have to also account for the capacity building aspect of it to actually have people access those finances. If we get there in the next 5-10 years, I think that'll be a success, a general success for the country. But at the moment, it's needed just because when you talk to RGF, one of the biggest issues that they're going to tell you is they don't have a pipeline of investable projects. That means there's capacity that we need to build so that RGF's pipeline becomes eventually BRD's pipeline, or even INM's pipeline. So it's a process that we have to go through, and the government needs to help because ultimately that's what we do. We are public servants.
Thank you.
I want to naturally come in to compliment on what my PS was was sharing, and the hand-holding term or phrase kept me thinking, is it possible the other way around? Because I think here, what we call hand-holding is actually offering to the entrepreneurs what we think we have in terms of knowledge, or in terms of policies and everything, that would be favorable for them to grow and grow fast. If we on the other side of the coin would be that you are in this business, clean cooking, you are in this business, e-mobility, and maybe there is something that I don't get as a policymaker. It's the cafes like this that would help us meet somewhere. Come, feel free, come talk to us, come talk to PS that, yes, you think you are promoting clean cooking. In actual sense, this regulation is anti-clean cooking. Do something about it. That's the only way we are going to see more investments, more interest from that side. So I think it should be both ways. My neighbor was telling me it has worked so well in fintech. And I think we have to do exactly the same to at least hold each other from a perspective where you're stronger than me, then we shape this thing together. Thank you.
I'll just add that our doors are always open. I've learned that it usually just takes an email to the ministry and then someone ends up in my office. It's that easy. You send an email, you say you need to meet us, this is what you have, this is what you want to discuss, and one of us will be made available so we can discuss things. And eventually, if this leads to a policy change that changes the business environment that you're in for the better, then we're willing to take that on.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, this is really, really useful. I always tell my friends that the Rwanda Green Fund, they have one of the most difficult jobs because essentially they go every day to work to write themselves out of a job. Because once they achieve their mandate, they're out of a job. So anyway, in that regard, DJ Rema, you mentioned a very, very valuable point. I think, take example of clean cooking. It's a really, really straight line regulation. At the district level, schools are centralized at district level, so they no longer have a budget. So this really, really affects procurement. By unlocking just that one thing, the whole sector is open. So you're right. For example, the schools that we work with, around 100, they, mostly in Kigali and in the cities, the ones that are around the cities, PS is 100% spot on, saying the issue is that transition finance, that initial investment, because otherwise they buy firewood every day, right? So now, how do they transition? How do they get that initial investment? We as private sector, we are willing to fund that against a very simple thing. We did it with Faraway, with Lycée de Kigali, with you lock a contract. So procurement, you lock a contract of, let's say, five years. You recover. They are guaranteed to buy from that person, and then it's done. It's really, really that easy. But now the schools don't have that structure. We can forgo our margin. Maybe you recoup your initial investment in 2 years, but you're assured of the 3 year to make your margin for profitability, and then they can open it up. There are many ways to structure this. But we don't talk to each other. There's this thing where government is increasingly talking to government. We need to break that cycle, and I believe this is one of the forums, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, there is someone who has just asked. The government is it babysitting the startups or hand holding? Yeah. So yeah, it's the same thing. Hand holding and babysitting, the same thing. Yeah. Sure. Maybe I'm an old school. So, but and the PS talked about capacity building. I think one of the responsibilities of the government is not capacity building. I think the government should focus more on policies, that conducive policies that address the realities on the ground. And the rest, the private sector, the non-state actors should play that other aspect. Otherwise, you keep rotating, and you find that your burn rates are not improving, because you're doing what you're not supposed to be doing. So, I think government should focus on ensuring that the legal frameworks are conducive and participatory, the policies. So the rest, the private sector and the non-state actors, should do the capacity building.
What's an example of a policy that we could revise so that we can then unlock that and step away?
The renewable energy policy. We have a national energy policy, but it has its own bottlenecks. So if we are looking at renewable energy, investment in private investment in renewable energy, there is need for a standalone renewable energy policy. Maybe we can discuss that after. It might be a bit technical for this cafe.
Okay, we'll discuss later.
Thank you. Anyone else has a question or a statement to say?
Thank you all for this conversation. I'm really curious to hear from the different perspectives, be government or bank or business. What's the hardest part of launching the projects? Is it at a preparation level? You mentioned it earlier with some of the projects sometimes not being well prepared enough. Is it also at risk perception? Is it scaling it? Is it perceptions of, or how we frame it to investors? Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi. And you will all answer her question and share your closing statements. I don't want to keep you in this hot sun for too long.
Should I start? The hardest part, it's getting it all to come together, right? Like, you have each individual part, but it's all about getting all the right pieces in play to all act at the same time. I think that's the hardest part, and that requires you to be up at 2 a.m, getting this bank to come in, getting this supplier to go. So from a private sector perspective, I think that it's all about coordinating all of the above. And I always think it's a lot easier than it actually is until we're at the wire and everything needs to come together. I was up until 3 a.m. last night writing a business plan for suppliers so that we can get financing, right? So yeah, it's all the above. I wouldn't want to underscore any individual ones, because I think it's just all hard, and having the right team that can really support you and the right partners makes it a lot easier, right?
I think I agree with him. But from the banking side, the biggest challenge is, so you have two challenges. You have the new businesses that are approaching you. So their risks are different. And then you have the tested models like Abisa, and the banks are thinking you're growing too fast. Yeah, I think that's the challenge you're facing. So you've started, you've proven, you've gotten in a bit of the funding. Now the next phase is he growing too fast? And the only way to address that is to move the banks from the traditional mindset and really look at what is happening today, the adaptability. How do you adapt to what is changing? And how do you adapt to its growth rate and fund it? Because then, the usual question is, okay, it's a 3-year business. Is that experience enough? And can you answer that question? What is the commitment of the principal shareholder? Has he put in anything? Or will he move away and leave me with the bank debt? So it's a bit of so many factors. But I think the mindset for the banks is also changing. We're more adaptive, we're more thinking solutions, we're more getting in partners to de-risk. And I think we'll see a change in the next couple of years. So again, and we're trying to, maybe to support Kabisa, is we're trying to use the concepts in Rwanda for other subsidiaries in Kenya, in Tanzania, Uganda, so that they can learn from what we've done, and we sort of introduce them to partners we're working with. So sometimes Rwanda benefits from having key partners, and once we prove a concept here, is then we can shift the partners to the other subsidiaries where you want to scale. So those are conversations we're having. So I think it's a lot of factors. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Maybe to add on that, and also gauging from the experience of the Development Bank of Rwanda when we started IREME, I would maybe highlight one of the main challenges being resource mobilization. So given the way that we provide capital to the market, we also source it from our development partners. And we also know that we're aware that for climate projects, they require what we call patient capital. So concessional loans, having enough repayment periods and also grace periods. That was the main challenges to find channeling these available or international climate funding that is appropriate to our market. So you would find that maybe you find certain credit line, and if you are sourcing it in foreign currency, you have to do that swap. You have to give the financing in local currency and also expect returns or repayments in local currency. And then you find that it's a challenge to provide that concessionality. So I'd say mainly is that was the main challenge, and also in terms of capacity building, both internally for BRD, because it was also another new sort of chapter we are starting, and also the market perspective, because I think these were discussions that happened at the initial stages, whereby even the market were saying going green is more expensive than the normal way of doing business. So those are the two main challenges that we faced.
Thank you. I don't think I have a lot to add. As most of the people said, I think it's more factors to it. Yes, preparation and readiness from the business side, and then the risk perception from the capital providers, maybe by not having the right tools and the right data that inform the actual risk, because there is the risk that is perceived, but there is also the actual risk, which is indicated by so many factors, and now even given the climate intelligence coming in the space, either being the satellite imaging and all that for agriculture specifically, maybe it's contributing to knowing the actual risk, and that makes even the banks move away from traditional lending and more on, okay, can we bet on the cash flows? Can we bet on what the future is indicating, other than just basing on the actual assets that are on ground to give them financing? So I think it's many factors that contribute to it, and capital providers being flexible enough to actually look at all the factors other than just looking at the traditional way of doing things. So yeah, I think it requires innovation from either be it the business perspective, but also the financier's perspective on don't consider only an asset for you to give them capital. Maybe go to look at their cash flows, maybe look at the contracts that they have, maybe look at the demand that is in the market, that you can be able to actually monetize and quantify other than just looking at the actual assets. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So I'll answer it from the government perspective. As a country, we suffer the impacts of climate change. So every time we're trying to develop projects, whether it be projects that end up supporting the financial sector, or it's projects that we have to implement to increase our climate resilience, it takes too long. I think that would be the biggest hurdle that we have. The various partners that we work with, it might take them between 3 and 5 years to actually, from the point where you're starting to discuss an idea to the point where we sign a financing agreement. And in 5 years, there is a lot that can change. There's a lot that changes, actually. And it becomes so difficult to make these projects relevant all the time. So we're trying to work with them to see how we can accelerate that process, so we can then see impact on the ground faster. Thank you.
Thank you so much. From what I've learned today is that many of the projects that we've discussed are clearly necessary. They are innovative, they respond to real climate challenges, and they contribute to Rwanda's vision for a greener and more resilient Rwanda. Yet, even when something is widely recognized as the right thing to do, it can still struggle to attract capital. This reminds us that the challenge is rarely about intention, but more often is about understanding risk. It's about structure, it's about timing, and sometimes it's simply about who is willing to move first. So I'm going to stand up. So at the beginning of this event, I mentioned that climate finance can often feel like a very technical language, one that is not always easy to explain. But I hope we leave this place, we leave Kivu Noir, knowing a little bit more about climate finance. And that's exactly why we created the Catalyst Café, because before capital moves, conversations need to happen. Conversation that helps us understand the barriers, challenge assumptions, and think collectively about how to unlock the next stage of investments. And that's where we had the idea of the Catalyst campaign. A catalyst does not replace capital, it helps unlock it. It reduces friction, builds confidence, and helps ideas move from promise to investment. Thank you so much to all of you for being part of the first ever edition of the Catalyst Café. We look forward to continuing this dialogue with you at the next edition. See you soon, very soon.